Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the MSCG webinar on supply chain disruption caused by the coronavirus and other factors. This is a 60-minute session with about 45 minutes of presentation and 15 minutes of Q&A. Just for everyone's information, this is a recorded session. Please be on mute as a courtesy to other participants during the presentation. Feel free to post your questions on chat and we will get it during the 15 minutes of Q&A. With that said, I will hand you over to Dan to run through the agenda for today. Over to you, Dan.
Thanks, Amir. Can we go to the next slide? Thanks, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone, wherever you are. Quickly, the agenda, we will go through the introductions of the two speakers here, and then we will start looking into the supply chain disruptions aspects of what is happening, why it's happening, how long we think the disruptions are going to last and their impact. Then we will go through specifics of three key scenarios and how companies can handle those situations of disruption and the kind of mitigation strategies that they can employ to mitigate their risk. And toward the end, we will then also discuss the My Supply Chain Group's methodology of agile assessment and action plan to counter these disruptions in a significant manner with short-term, mid-term, long-term plans for them. Next slide, please. My name is Dan Bhide. I am the co-founder and partner at My Supply Chain Group with more than 30 client engagements over the past 20 years. Odell, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hey, my name is Odell Smith. I have, thanks to all of you guys for being here today. I have about 30 years of supply chain business and IT experience, 20 years, over 20 years of developing advanced supply chain planning tools in several different verticals, and I have 11 years here with my supply chain group. I'm a supply chain architect and delivery partner.
Thanks, Odell. You know, several of our key subject matter experts have provided inputs for this, and we want to acknowledge the contribution of Samir, Himanshu, Mahesh, and Sanjay in putting this overall deck together. Thanks to them that we are able to present this today to all of you. Next slide, please. Just a quick one-pager introduction about My Supply Chain Group. We are a premier enterprise consulting firm that offers innovative solutions in the supply chain strategy, process engineering, and applications integration arena across multiple industry verticals. We were founded in 2008, have been around now for 12 years with the head office in the US and also subsidiaries in Canada, Mexico, and Asia Pacific. As a company, we have had more than 60 clients so far, and we are growing rapidly with 160 consultants all over the world, majority of them in the US, but also with consultants in, like we said, Canada, Latin America, Australia, India, and so on. When it comes to our services, we go beyond the supply chain strategies to also help companies with their supply chain diagnostics to do the roadmap development for the long-term programs that they would have in place, process ranging and process optimization aspects. And we are known for our global rollouts and implementations. We also do application maintenance services. As I said earlier, we focus on multiple industry verticals. The key ones for us have been the consumer products, food and beverage, oil and gas, chemicals, life sciences, pharma, high-tech, aerospace and defense, manufacturing, and so on. And our key solution offerings are related to supply chain planning. Within that, we do, in terms of solutions, SAP supply chain solutions like integrated business planning and advanced planning and optimization. We also have extensive expertise with planning capabilities in S/4HANA for production planning, detailed scheduling, available to promise, and so on. We also have a rapidly growing practice in supply chain execution with focus on embedded and core extended warehouse management, transportation management, air logistics, and so on. In addition, we also have a significantly growing practice now on predictive analytics and business warehousing and so on. In terms of why MSCG, we have always been known for our seasoned leadership, for very innovative thought leadership and innovative solutions, focus on high quality and cost effective solutions. We are known for our risk mitigation and value maximization skill set that many industry clients have benefited from, and we always bring best practices from across multiple industry verticals relevant to the clients. Next slide, please. Let's look at the what, why, when kind of aspects of the disruption that all of us are going through right now. Next slide. We all are at the suffering end of this corona virus pandemic that is now a global pandemic. As we all know, around the world, there have been more than 40,000 deaths already, more than 800,000 people infected. In the US alone, more than 2,000 deaths and more than 120,000 people infected. Unfortunately, the experts in this field say that these numbers are going to keep doubling every 4 to 7 days. So there is a real concern that around the globe, these numbers will increase very rapidly. There is also the US-China trade war and tensions that have been going around for the last more than a year or two. In fact, if the companies had already started working or acting on these trade war related tensions to diversify their supply chains, maybe they are suffering less at this point in time from the disruptions from this COVID-19 global pandemic than those who probably had not. There is also, as we all see, a major problem with the crash in oil demand, and that's reflected in the prices because of the lack of demand and with the glut of oil supplies. As of yesterday night, the Brent crude was down to around $26 a barrel, something that we hadn't seen for many years. And many of the stock indices around the globe have declined anywhere between 15 to 35%. And all these fears combined together, this confluence of all these multiple factors is giving rise to fears about the impending recession. So COVID is the big trigger. There are multiple other factors that also have been shaping this up over the last several months and maybe a couple of years. Many of the experts, because of this, are describing this something like a once in a blue moon black swan event. What they say is a black swan event is when something is extremely unpredictable, not discernible from the past patterns, has a very severe and widespread impact, and the consequences are such that people then tend to rationalize this as having been predictable, but only with the benefit of the bias of hindsight. So this is what we are all dealing with. Most people had not anticipated the level of disruption that we are all experiencing right now. And that's what we are going to talk about in the next few slides as well. Next slide, please. Let's look at the financial impact of this. They say that the world economy will contract by about 1 to 3% during this pandemic or during this situation that we are all in. And if 1 to 3% doesn't sound like a large number, realize that even in the 2007 through 2009 global financial crisis, the world economy had shrunk by barely 0.1%. So it's a very massive contraction of the global economy that we will be dealing with. In the US alone, the Treasury Secretary himself has estimated that there will be a contraction of about 24 to 30% of the US GDP for the second quarter alone. And the unemployment rates are expected to rise to somewhere in the range of 13 to 20%. So this is nothing to scoff at, a very serious situation that we are all dealing with. And unfortunately, because of people being locked down, the short-term and mid-term shock to the demand having gone down for a lot, majority of products, is going to have a more severe impact on the economy than the short-term supply shock that we are experiencing on many of the items. Companies like Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs are even claiming that the global recession is already underway. And the financial shock that poor are going to, all of us, but especially poor, are suffering through, may even create a second economic pandemic followed by this health pandemic. So that is indeed a serious concern. Coronavirus pandemic has, unlike many other shocks in the past, delivered the fastest and deepest economic shock in the history. And this unprecedented combined effect of what we see as the demand shock, the supply shock, and financial shock is going to have impact for a very extensive foreseeable future. Next slide, please. When it comes to disruptions on the supply chains or across the supply networks of companies, 75+% of US companies, and I would imagine it's a fairly similar number or even more around the world, have been severely impacted by all of these shocks. And many of these companies are also therefore lowering the revenue targets. A very large percent, 40+% of companies really do not have the kind of plans that were needed to handle this kind of disruptions that are being faced by all of us world over. And just to give you an example, in the last few weeks alone, the freight charges have gone up by 15%, and they will have their ripple effect across the global supply network, just as many other factors will have a bullwhip effect of their impact as well. It has indeed been a wake-up call for supply chain management. Companies always claim to have risk mitigation strategies, but now they don't seem to be sufficient. The CEO of Target said, hey, no, there is no playbook. We are writing the script each and every day on the fly, which also means the ability to respond to new situations on the fly. It becomes very crucial, and we'll talk a bit more about this kind of on-the-fly what-if planning capabilities that companies need later as well. Fortunately, it seems like the production, China has slowly tried to catch up again on its original production capabilities. They have started to rebound, and we have started seeing an increase in the shipments out of China again. So while China was the first to experience this pandemic, it seems to be coming out now. So that may ease up the disruptions to some extent, but again, it's going to be a while before the disruptions can bring us to what we are now thinking that will be a new normal for all of us. Next slide, please. When we look at why is the impact so severe, one would realize that there have been some trends that have been in the play for the last 2 or 3 decades, and those trends have now made the recent disruptions to concoct a mix that is extremely hazardous for us all. If you look at the fact that over the last 2-3 decades, companies have talked about and enacted strategic sourcing. What that means was the cost-driven decisions to deal with fewer and fewer suppliers in more concentrated geographies meant that whenever those regions or those suppliers are going through a disruption, they will have a disproportionate impact on the overall networks. There has also been this initiative towards the outsourcing and lean manufacturing over the last 2-3 decades, which meant that there is only very limited capability available locally or internally within a company to expand their internal production capabilities when the situation so requires, as is the case now. And also, many companies have enabled just-in-time inventory for all of their raw materials, finished goods, and so on, or trading goods. What that means is they are very low on buffer stock wherever they're nearer their customer base. And while that forced the vendors to keep maybe extra inventories, that inventory now cannot be brought quickly enough to where the customer bases are. So there is a significant misalignment between inventory at the customer regions versus inventory at the supplier regions, not reaching the customer regions because of this disruption. Now, these long-term trends are meeting the 3 new disruptions that we are experiencing. The disrupted networks mean that there are significant production shutdowns. There are regional lockdowns. People can't even get to work. Even if they can get to work, they may not have enough other facilities, raw materials available, for example, and that's leading us into a disrupted supply situation where we can't have enough of the input materials or enough of the trading materials available in the customer regions. And also there is a disruption of demand because of the lockdown. People are not able to go out and spend money. There is a run on certain products like masks and sanitizers and devices, but there is also a glut of oil and gas. But then there is a shortage of many other things that we are all experiencing. The toilet paper being just an example of the kind of severe shortages and empty shelves that many of us have seen around in our grocery markets, for example. So essentially, these decades-old trends are meeting the short-term demand, supply, and economic shocks, and that is what's creating this fear of recession. Next slide, please. The logical question all of us are asking is, when will normalcy be restored? When will I be able to go out and get back to the normal? As we said, there will be a new normal. I doubt that we will be able to get back to what we pursued as the normal just a few months ago. As we all know, the health crisis itself is going to take weeks, if not even months, to resolve. And even after the health crisis is resolved, then the disruption that we have experienced through the supply chains are also going to take again weeks, if not months, for us to comprehend and stabilize and recover from. And the reason for that is the priming of the pump to get the economy jump started, to remove the the choke nodes of the supply networks is going to be a very time consuming and excruciatingly complex thing to deal with. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development is warning that this global economic hit from this coronavirus pandemic is going to be felt for a long time, for multiple quarters, possibly a couple of years or longer, to all of us to recover out of. What that means is, while all of us are struggling with and dealing with these short-term disruptions, the disruptions may continue into the midterm and long term, and that means we will need to now have strategies to go beyond the short-term firefighting to look into the midterm and long-term aspects of how do we prepare ourselves to the new normal. And that is where the strategy, the action plans, and the continued reassessments of those action plans is going to become very crucial.